Imagine being born into a battlefield with no memory of why you were sent there. From your first breath, the energy around you feels heavy, distorted, almost alien. You look into the eyes of your caregivers and sense something is off, even before you have language to explain it. You grow up surrounded by dysfunction, manipulation, silence, projection, or even outright abuse. And as a child, you think it's your fault. You think you're broken. But deep inside, something keeps whispering, you don't belong here not because you're less, but because you're more. What if I told you this was not a mistake? What if I told you that being born into a toxic family was not a punishment but a mission? We, the dark chosen ones, are not born into comfort. We are not placed into environments that reflect our light. We are planted in soil that has been poisoned for generations because our presence is the only thing that can change its chemistry. We are the disruptors, the pattern breakers, the ones sent to end cycles that have lived for centuries. And to end them, we must experience them. The soul does not come to earth to watch from the sidelines. It comes to embody, to transmute, to transform. And that transformation begins in the place most people spend their whole lives trying to escape from the family. Toxic families are not random. They are assignments. They are soul contracts written with tears and fire. They are the dense environments required to activate the deepest codes within us. Because only through oppression do we discover our resistance. Only through betrayal do we learn discernment. Only through abandonment do we remember self-reclamation. The soul chooses the wound it is destined to heal. And when you are born into a toxic family, you're not just carrying your own pain, you're carrying generations of unprocessed grief, rage, shame, and fear. You are the one who came to feel it all so it could finally be released.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But let's be honest, it doesn't feel noble when you're in it. It feels cruel. It feels like you're being punished, like the universe got your file mixed up. You watch other families and wonder why you weren't born into love, into support, into safety. You wonder why the people who were supposed to protect you became the source of your deepest wounds. And in that wondering, a seed of power is planted. Because the moment you start to question the narrative, you begin to awaken. You begin to see the cracks in the illusion. And through those cracks, your soul begins to shine. Let me ask you something now, and I want you to sit with it in silence. What did your family teach you that you had to unlearn just to survive? What beliefs, what patterns, what lies were fed to you as truth? Because those lies are the chains, and your freedom begins the moment you name them. Not to blame, not to hate, but to reclaim. Reclaim your voice, your worth, your energy. Because toxic families don't just damage, they train. They train you to abandon yourself. They train you to doubt your intuition. They train you to play small, to stay silent, to sacrifice your truth for survival. And that's exactly where your awakening begins. You see, the dark chosen ones are born into these environments not to be victims, but to be alchemists. We are the ones who came to take the poison and turn it into power. But to do that, we must first feel the poison. We must sit with the discomfort most people avoid. We must confront the denial, the manipulation, the gaslighting, and say, this is not love. This is a lie, and that confrontation is terrifying, because it often means separating from the very people who gave us life. It means grieving the parents we wished we had. It means standing alone in our truth when the entire family system demands our silence. But silence has a cost, and that cost is your soul. Every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace, a part of you dies. Every time you pretend it didn't hurt, your energy dims. Every time you play along with the illusion to avoid rejection, you abandon your mission. And the mission is this: to bring truth into a system built on lies. You were not sent to play along. You were sent to interrupt. And that interruption begins with your own awakening. The awakening happens slowly at first. Maybe it's a moment in childhood where you realize you're not like them. You feel deeper. You ask uncomfortable questions. You see the contradictions. Or maybe it's a moment in adolescence when the pain becomes too loud to ignore. You start seeking, reading, meditating, asking why. And then one day the illusion breaks. You see your family for what they are: not evil, not villains, but unconscious, wounded, repeating what was done to them. And in that moment, something shifts. You stop trying to change them, and you start changing yourself. That's where the real journey begins. Not when you escape your family, but when you decide to heal what they refuse to face. You begin to rewrite the energetic blueprint. You begin to break the lineage curses. You begin to process the grief they denied, to feel the rage they suppressed, to speak the truth they buried. And every time you do, you reclaim not just your own power, but the power of every ancestor who came before you. You become the living proof that transformation is possible, that healing is real, that the cycle can end. But make no mistake, this path is not for the faint of heart. It requires you to walk alone, to be misunderstood, to be labeled the black sheep, the rebel, the crazy one. But you are not crazy. You are conscious. And consciousness is threatening in systems built on denial. So don't expect applause. Don't expect validation. Expect resistance. Expect projection. Expect them to call you the problem when you're actually the solution. And then keep going. Because your soul didn't come here to be liked. It came here to liberate. You will have to grieve. Not just the loss of a fantasy family, but the loss of who you were before you awakened. The version of you that needed their approval. The version that blamed yourself for their dysfunction. The version that thought healing meant fixing them. You'll have to release all of it. Because healing doesn't happen when they change, it happens when you change. When you stop waiting for an apology. When you stop seeking closure. When you stop needing them to understand. And instead, you give yourself everything they couldn't. Let me ask you something deeper now. What part of yourself are you still suppressing to stay connected to people who are committed to misunderstanding you? Because that's the trade-off. Every time you choose belonging in a toxic system, you disconnect from your truth. And truth is your compass, your weapon, your medicine. You cannot fulfill your mission while betraying your intuition. You cannot awaken the world while still sedating yourself to stay safe in a family that fears your light. And your light is powerful. It's disruptive. It's divine. That's why you were placed in that family. Not to be broken, but to break the chain. not to fit in, but to stand out, not to continue the story, but to rewrite it. You are the walking contradiction to everything they believe. And that contradiction is sacred. It's not your job to convince them. It's not your job to drag them into the light. It's your job to be the light, even if it blinds them. As you rise, everything changes. Your perception shifts. Your vibration rises. Your old coping mechanisms fall away. You no longer need to argue. You no longer need to prove. You realize that your healing is the loudest statement you can make. And you start attracting a new kind of family, not always by blood, but by frequency. Soul family. People who see you, hear you, love you without conditions. And you realize that family is not about genetics, it's about resonance. It's about truth. It's about energy. And you stop mourning what never was because you're finally living what is. This is your path. This is your power. This is why you were born into that toxic family, not as punishment, but as preparation. Preparation for a mission so sacred, so specific, that only you could carry it. And now that you remember, the real work begins. Once you accept that your family was not a mistake, but a mission, something inside you begins to shift. The anger starts to burn differently. It becomes a forge, not a firestorm. The sadness feels less like a hole and more like a map. You begin to retrace your pain, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. Because every wound you carry from that toxic lineage is an invitation, an initiation, a challenge from the universe asking you, will you alchemize this or will you repeat it? And in that moment you realize healing is not a soft word. It's a spiritual rebellion. It's the declaration that the pain ends with you. We, the dark chosen ones, were never meant to be passive participants in life. We were born to transmute density into light. But here's the truth: transmutation is not poetic. It's brutal. It means waking up in the middle of the night shaking from generational trauma that didn't even start with you. It means questioning your worth because the people who raised you couldn't see their own. It means detaching from people who share your blood but deny your soul. And doing all of it without losing the softness inside that still believes in love. That's the paradox we live in. We are warriors with open hearts, healers with scars, rebels with codes embedded in our DNA. When a dark chosen one awakens, a ripple is sent through the ancestral field. You may not see it, but something shifts. Old traumas begin to stir. Energies that were buried for decades rise to the surface. You become the energetic pressure point, the mirror, the pattern interrupter. And suddenly, family members who've been asleep for years start reacting to you not because you're doing something wrong, but because your frequency is activating their shadows. Your healing becomes a threat. Your boundaries become a rebellion. Your silence becomes louder than any scream. And the system that once defined you begins to see you as the problem. But you're not the problem. You are the proof that healing is possible. And that proof terrifies those who've built their identity inside dysfunction. They don't want to see you rise, because if you rise, it means they could have too. It means they chose safety over truth. It means they stayed asleep while you woke up, and so they lash out. They belittle your growth. They twist your words. They label you selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Not because you are, but because they can't face the mirror you've become. Here's where things get even harder. You will be tempted to shrink, to go back, to make yourself small just to be accepted again. You'll crave their love, even if it's toxic. You'll want to be understood, even if it costs you your truth. But this is the test. This is the initiation. Will you betray your soul to stay connected to people who never saw you clearly? Or will you stand in your truth, even if it means standing alone? That's the moment of power. That's when the universe leans in and says, "Show me who you really are." Let me ask you something now, and answer this with ruthless honesty. Where are you still asking for permission to exist? Who are you still performing for? Who are you still hoping will finally say, "I'm proud of you"? Because that's the part of you that needs your love the most. Not their love, your love. The part of you that learned to earn love by being perfect, being quiet, being invisible. That part is not broken. It's just tired. It's been carrying a weight that was never yours. When you begin to love that part of yourself unconditionally, the game changes. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing approval. You realize that the family you were born into was meant to break you open, not define you. And in that breaking, something sacred was revealed, a resilience so ancient it could only have come from lifetimes of surviving the impossible. That's who you really are. Not the wound, not the story, but the soul that chose to return here and transmute it all. This is where your journey becomes spiritual in the deepest sense. Because healing your family wounds isn't just therapy, it's alchemy. It's soul work. It's the moment you stop seeing your parents as gods or monsters and start seeing them as wounded children in aging bodies. You realize your mother's control came from fear. Your father's silence came from pain. Your siblings' betrayal came from survival. And you stop needing an apology because you understand the truth. They were never equipped to love you in the way you needed. But you are. You are equipped now. You have the tools. You have the awareness. You have the connection to something greater. And with that awareness comes responsibility. Not to fix them, not to save them, but to break the cycle within yourself. To stop passing on the same wounds through your friendships, your relationships, your children, because that's how the curse ends. Not with revenge, not with confrontation, but with consciousness. You begin to see that every toxic pattern was a lesson in disguise. Manipulation taught you to trust your intuition. Emotional neglect taught you to meet your own needs. Betrayal taught you to build unshakable boundaries. Abandonment taught you to become your own home. And now you carry the medicine. The wisdom forged in fire. The codes that can only be activated through lived experience. You didn't learn this in a book. You earned it. You embodied it. And now you're ready to serve. Not from a place of ego, but from a place of embodiment. You don't need to preach. Your presence is the sermon. Your healed energy creates permission for others to do the same. And slowly, the ripple continues. Your friends change. Your partners change. Your business changes. Your life becomes a reflection of your truth, not your trauma. That's when you know the mission is working. But don't expect perfection. there will still be triggers. There will still be moments when the old family patterns creep into your voice, your thoughts. That's not failure, it's feedback. Triggers are not regressions. They're invitations. They show you where more love is needed, more presence, more truth. And every time you meet that trigger with awareness instead of judgment, you evolve. You rise. You reclaim one more piece of yourself that was lost in the fire. Let me ask you now, with full presence, what part of yourself are you still afraid to express because your family taught you it was dangerous? Is it your voice? Your sexuality? Your creativity? Your anger? Your joy? That's the part that holds the key to your freedom. That's the energy they couldn't control, and so they tried to shame it. Reclaim it now, not for revenge, but for remembrance. Because when you remember who you are, you remember who you were always meant to be. And here's the final truth. You were never meant to save your family. You were meant to save yourself. Because in saving yourself, you become the example, the living proof, the spark. And maybe, just maybe, one day they'll see it. Maybe they'll awaken. Maybe they'll begin their own healing. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to walk your path with integrity, no matter who follows. Your responsibility is to embody the light you were born with, even if it offends their darkness. Because you're not here to be digestible. You're here to be divine. You're not here to be accepted. You're here to be authentic. You're not here to be safe. You're here to be sovereign. And now that you know this, there's no going back. The veil has lifted. The codes have activated. The mission has begun. When you reach this point on your journey, everything begins to feel surreal. It's not that the pain disappears or the memories fade, it's that your relationship to them transforms. What once defined you now refines you. What once shackled you now sharpens you. You begin to see your life not as a series of traumas, but as a sacred curriculum. Every wound was a classroom. Every betrayal, a mirror. Every silence, a lesson in how to hear your own voice. And when you finally understand this, not just mentally, but energetically, you realize you were never just surviving. You were awakening. Being born into a toxic family is the soul's way of initiating you into your power before you even know what power is. It's the first test, the first battlefield, the first layer of darkness you must walk through to remember your light. And not the soft, polished light people post about on social media. I'm talking about the raw, untamed, blazing light that can only be forged in the fires of dysfunction. The light that makes no apologies. The light that burns away illusions and reveals absolute truth. That's the light you carry now. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you earned it in silence, in isolation, in moments when no one clapped for you, but you kept going anyway. You no longer look at your family as the enemy. You see them for what they are: souls in pain, stuck in patterns, operating at the level of awareness they chose to stay in. You stop needing them to change. You stop needing them to validate your path. You stop waiting for the apology that may never come. Because you've become your own closure, your own parent, your own healer. And in doing that, you break the contract that kept you energetically tethered to their dysfunction. You are no longer trying to pull them into the light. You are becoming the light that walks away when it's time. This walking away is not about bitterness. It's about clarity. It's about finally realizing that love without truth is manipulation, that loyalty without boundaries is self-betrayal, that family without respect is just a title. And when you honor that clarity, the universe begins to open doors that only truth can walk through. You begin to attract people who see you, not the mask, not the role, but you, the real you. The version of you that was buried under years of pretending, pleasing, and trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. You finally understand that you were never hard to love. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't love themselves. Let me ask you now, and let this question penetrate deeply. What are you still holding on to in hopes that one day your family will finally understand you? Because that's the cord. That's the invisible chain. That's the energy leak that's costing you your next level. You cannot rise while dragging their approval like a suitcase behind you. You cannot embody your mission while still hoping they'll clap for a truth they never believed in. So let it go. Not with resentment, but with honor. Honor the version of you that tried everything. Honor the effort. Honor the loyalty. And then release it. What happens next is something truly mystical. You begin to live outside the paradigm of pain. You begin to create from joy, not trauma. You begin to lead from wisdom, not wounds. And your energy becomes medicine. Not because you're trying to heal others, but because your being is now encoded with truth. People feel different around you. They open. They soften. They awaken. Not because you're preaching, but because you're embodying. You are the living example of what it means to rise from the fire without becoming bitter. To stand in your truth without needing to shout. To love yourself so completely that others remember how to do the same. And yet, the mission continues. Being a dark chosen one doesn't mean you've graduated. It means you've been given more responsibility. The more light you carry, the more darkness you'll be asked to walk through. Not because you're being punished, but because you've proven you can go deeper. You've proven you won't run. You've proven that you can hold space for the collective grief, shame, and rage that others are still suppressing. And now, your presence becomes a portal, or bridge. A frequency that others subconsciously recognize as safe, even if their ego resists it. You begin to live in two worlds, one foot in the physical, one in the spiritual. One grounded in daily life, the other tuned into cosmic truth. You see the matrix and the miracle in everything. You watch people argue over illusions and feel compassion because you remember when you were there. And you don't judge them, you witness them. You become the observer, the anchor, the lighthouse. And in doing so, you fulfill the deepest purpose of your soul, to embody the frequency of liberation in a world addicted to bondage. Let me ask you something that only the brave can answer. What version of yourself are you still keeping small out of loyalty to people who never saw your full light? That version is your next breakthrough. That version is your purpose waiting to be unleashed. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe your family your dimming. You don't owe the past your presence. You owe yourself everything. Your truth, your expression, your full embodiment. Because when you rise, you don't just free yourself, you free every soul watching in silence, waiting for permission to do the same. This is why you were born into that family, to be the permission slip, the pattern breaker, the one who didn't repeat the cycle but rebuilt the system, not with revenge, not with ego, but with radical, embodied truth. You were the wild card in the bloodline, the one they couldn't predict, the one they couldn't program. And maybe they tried. Maybe they used guilt, shame, religion, silence, or fear. But none of it worked. Because your soul remembered. Your soul always remembered. And now that you've remembered, your life must reflect that truth. No more shrinking. No more waiting. No more hoping they'll change. The mission is active now. Your energy is needed. Your story is sacred. Your presence is prophetic. You've survived what others didn't. You've transmuted what others suppressed. You've healed what others handed down like inheritance. And now it's time to lead. Not from a stage, not from ego, but from embodiment. From every moment you choose truth over comfort, boundaries over guilt, alignment over approval. This is the revolution not outside, but within. You are the revolution. Your healing is the rebellion. Your joy is the resistance. And every time you laugh without shame, love without fear, speak without apology, you send a shockwave through the collective field. You remind others what's possible. You remind them that being born into pain doesn't mean you were meant to live there. You remind them that freedom is not a place, it's a choice. Being a vibration, a state of being. So now I ask you, one final time, are you ready to live as the version of you that no longer carries the weight of a family that was never meant to contain your light? Are you ready to embody your truth so fully that the past can no longer pull you back into roles that no longer fit? Are you ready to be so free, so whole, so unapologetically yourself that you become the ancestor your bloodline has been waiting for?